How's it going? Welcome back to Farm Friday. Today what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be going over with you how to prep a garden bed. Now this is relevant not only when you're switching over from one season's crops to the next, because I do see a lot of people forget to do that. They'll just pull up the old crops and plop new ones down in the ground, and they'll find that second or third time they do this, all of a sudden their plants just aren't really growing anymore. This is good for that, but it's also good when you're starting a bed for the very first time. I'm going to show you how to prepare the soil, how to get everything ready, and we're going to do a couple little tricks to really optimize the growth that we can get out of the soil. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Alright, so this here is the bed that we're going to be working with. And before we get into the main steps, I'm going to cover step 0. And the reason I call this step 0 is it's only going to apply to about half of you. If you already have a garden bed set up and you're changing from season to season, you can go ahead and skip past this step. If, however, you're setting up a brand new garden bed for the first time, you're going to want to start here. Now, the first thing you're going to do is to remove the top 2 to 3 inches of soil. Now, I've had people in the past when I've been working, setting up garden beds for them or doing their landscape or something like that, tell me that I needed to go deeper than that, you need to go 6 inches deep or something like that. That's not true. We're going to treat the soil deeper than that, but you really only need to remove the top 2 to 3 inches. What you're going to do next is you're going to mix up a batch to replace the soil, and that's going to be 50% regular dirt. Now that can be the soil that you removed from here if you take all the weeds out of it first. If not, you can get yourself some fill dirt from any place or just about anything. And you're going to mix that 50% dirt, 25% compost, and 25% worm castings, which you can get again at pretty much any garden center, or if you do have a worm farm, of course, you can make your own. Now, if you are just starting out, you don't have any compost yet, or if you're just simply not an organic farmer, you don't care about, maintaining organic certifications or anything like that, the 25% compost you can replace with like a Miracle-Gro potting soil or something like that that's like a pre-fertilized soil. You're then going to put that back, replacing the 2 to 3 inches of dirt that you took out, and then you're going to rejoin the rest of us on step 1. Alright, so step 1, you're going to remove all organic material out of the garden bed. Now this includes last year's crops. It also includes any weeds, anything. You're going to want to get yourself a completely blank slate, right? No anything growing in this bed. This goes for both new beds and beds switching between seasons. Now, all of that old organic matter, you can take and put aside. You can either put it into compost, or there are a couple of different ways that it can be used in this process later on that we're going to touch on. But the important thing for right now is that your bed is a barren wasteland. There is nothing at all growing in it. Once you've done that, you have achieved step 1, and we're ready to go on to step 2. Alright, now on to step 2. This is an aerator. I recently put up a short about it and how to use it, what it's for. This is where it comes in handy. Now what we're going to do is we're going to aerate the soil, and I want to go about 6 inches down. Now as you complete each section of the soil, it should become incredibly soft and you should really sink into it. So it's important to remember as you're going to start on one end and move back towards the other end so that you don't have to step on the ground that you've already aerated. This should be the result of that, right? Both pre and post aeration. And you can see, you can just sink your hand right in there. It's very loose dirt. Again, you can't really even step on it because you'll sink right in. So that's how you want it to be. That's going to loosen up the soil. It's going to make the roots grow better. It's going to make the soil drain better. It's just an overall improvement. So once we've got it like this all the way across the bed, we're going to go ahead and move on to step 3. Now at this point your soil is prepped and we're ready to start giving it nutrients to make it a good hospitable home to our next crop. So step 3 is where it starts to get a little bit more complicated, and you're going to have to pay attention just to make sure you get everything right. So we now have a perfectly empty, barren garden bed with aerated soil, but no particularly good nutrients in it, aside from what we mixed in from the compost and the worm castings, if this is a brand new bed. Now we're going to start enriching the soil. During this time, you should have your crops that you're going to plant there starting. You should have your seeds in starters. They should be sprouting so that in a couple of weeks they'll be ready to go in the ground. In the meantime, we have here wood ash, bone meal, and compost tea. And here's what we're gonna do. For the next 5 days, every single day, we're gonna put a very light sprinkle of wood ash, a very light sprinkle of bone meal, and a very light spraying of compost tea onto the bed. We're then going to spray it down lightly with water. Now on the first 2 days of that 5-day period, that water is going to have mixed into it a teaspoon of Epsom salts. Obviously, this is a reused container. This is not an Epsom salt container, but here's the thing, and this is very, very important. I know that in the home farming and gardening world, we are really big on repurposing things and finding ways to do things cheaper, finding cheaper alternatives to stuff. It is important that you are aware that you cannot substitute some other kind of salt for Epsom salts. Epsom salts are not similar in any way to table salts or sea salt or pink Himalayan salt or rock salt or anything else, right? It needs to be Epsom salts. You're going to do this treatment and then spray down the bed. You don't want to soak the soil, just get it real damp, you know, and then you're going to cover it up and leave it covered until the next day when you come back to do the treatment. Now remember, first 2 days you add in the Epsom salts. The next 3 days you continue with the rest of the treatment, but just regular water. Now the reason that we're leaving the bed covered, and that is again critically important, is we're going to ensure that no weeds are going to grow up in that bed in the meantime. You can leave it uncovered, but if you do that, you're going to have to go through the trouble of weeding it. And even those little bits of, weeds that grow up in the meantime, they're taking just a little bit of nutrients out of the soil, which we don't want. Now again, just for those of us who are visual learners, your process is going to look something like this. A light dusting of wood ash, then a light dusting of bone meal next. Then we're drizzling the whole soil with compost tea. Now we're going to give it all a light watering, just like imagine basically if there were plants here. Maybe not quite as much water as that, but just a light watering. We're trying to mix all of that in and let it disperse evenly into the soil and also soak down deeper into the soil. Now we got it buttoned down nice and tight until tomorrow when we come back and do it all again. Remember, 2 days with salts, 5 days total. And then after that, just let the bed rest until the plants are ready to go in. Okay, so for step 4, we're going to talk about that little piece of wood that's over there. What we're doing now is we're going to put in vermiboxes into our soil. Now there's a couple of different ways you can go about this. I prefer to do a couple of small boxes spaced out throughout the bed. In this small bed here, we're going to do 2. So you can see I already have one down in there. Let me show you how to put in another one. Now you're going to want to get yourself a nice little bucket like this, right? And the size is going to depend on your garden bed. We could put like one, 10-liter bucket in here for this entire bed. I choose to do 2 small ones. If you have a larger bed, you might want to do an even bigger one than that. It just depends. We're gonna dig out a hole, which should be real easy after we aerated the soil. This soil should be super easy to dig in. And we want to put this in roughly flush with the surface of the soil. Now, the reason for the holes and the reason for this bucket in general is worms. We are trying to attract worms because worms will enrich the soil. So we've been enriching the soil, but that's just a temporary solution. That is going to all get pulled back out of the soil by the plants as they, do their growing. This should allow worms to continuously enrich the soil throughout the life of the plants. Now what we're doing here is we're filling this up with plant scraps, compostable materials, any sort of organic stuff. Kitchen waste will do. I'm using right now the leftover outer leaves of the cabbage plants from last season. We're gonna fill that, add in some dirt, and then we're gonna cover it with something heavy. And the reason we're doing that is to keep other varmint, raccoons, possums, things like that out of there. So I mentioned earlier that we had uses for all of that organic matter that we pulled out from last season's crops, from any weeding that we did, everything in step 1, removing all of that organic matter. This right here is making liquid fertilizer out of that. That's filled with water and old plant matter. We have 1, 2 full bins composting. That's on top of my main compost bin, which overfilled because of all of the material I had available. And then we have the boxes. So we have plenty to do with all of that old plant matter. I figured you could watch the river while we talk about this one last thing I wanted to touch on. So at this point, we have a really good bed. In my estimation, in my testing, in my experience, this is about the best darn bed that you can get without specifically tailoring it to a specific plant, which there are certain things you may want to do. For example, if your goal is growing roses, additional Epsom salts might be a good thing. There's all kinds of different things that may specifically work for one type of plant or another, but this is the best generalist bed that you could possibly want. This is consistently the best grow results. So there is one other thing that you could possibly do, and I'm bringing this up to you because otherwise I know somebody will point it out or leave saying, well, why didn't he talk about this? All of that excess plant material. Another way that you may possibly use it is by pulling off the top couple of inches of soil, regardless of if it's a new bed or a reused bed, putting that excess plant material underneath and then reburying it and just leaving it directly under the plants that you are planting. It decays, adding the nutrients back to the soil, it attracts worms, it does all those same things. Now here's the problem. I have found doing that is much more inconsistent than composting the material yourself, right? Fully composting it and using it as compost and having it available later on down the road. So I prefer to do it my way. However, if you are doing this for the very first time, you don't have any compost already available, and you do want to do this organically, you don't want to go with chemical fertilizer, that is an option that is available to you. So anyway, that's it. This bed behind me right now is on day 3 of treatment, so 2 more days. Remember, 2 days with salt, 5 days total. and then just leave it covered until your plants are ready to be planted. I guarantee you, doing it this way, you will have the best results you've ever had prepping your bed in any way. Any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave them down in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I really hope this helped you guys out, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.